going on, guys? Today we're going to be discussing OpenShift, specifically the deployment that I had went ahead and did in my home lab. To give you guys a bit of reference before we go ahead and get into it, pretty much I got interviewed for a position where it was going to entail me being the administrator over an OpenShift cluster. And at the time, I knew nothing about OpenShift, right? So I kind of was in a rush to learn how everything worked and try to put things together. So I tried to learn everything I could from everything that I had already available. To put you even more in context, their cluster was already up to the point where it just had a web console that was already launched and everything. So there wasn't really much adminning that I had to do outside of potentially launching applications, doing patching here and there. I didn't understand the underlying how everything fit together, why things were the way that they were, and etc. So I thought to myself, I was like, hey, so I'll deploy it on my own and see how that goes. Right, so I tried the code-ready containers, which is CRC, and you can find that on the Red Hat website. And I deployed that on my laptop, and oh my gosh, that thing just about crashed. I didn't realize how many resources you needed for. So I struck out there. Right. Then I said, okay, I'll deploy it in the cloud because OpenShift, Red Hat has a solution where you can do a sandbox developer environment. So I did that. And the thing about that was it was already deployed for me. So I was still kind of in the same space where I could deploy containers and everything like that, which was cool. But I still needed that experience of actually putting everything together so I would understand how everything worked underneath. So I bought this server, and then the funny thing about that was I had the cores, I had the long-term storage, but I needed more RAM. So I had to wait on that. And then, I thought it was going to be pretty much smooth sailing after I got all of the hardware and everything. But no, that was just the first hurdle. I had so many more struggles after that, trying to get things working, and I was going back and forth on Reddit, back and forth to the documentation, back and forth to the person's tutorial I was trying to follow, and I was struggling so bad trying to get things working. Ultimately, I was able to get my cluster working, and great experience, learned a lot from it, but I wanted to try to give back to the communities that helped me and everything like that. So I'll show you guys what I had came up with right here. Switch our scene. So I made this OKD Cluster Helper as a way of basically laying out the steps that you're going to do when you deploy your own cluster. So basically you guys can have a way easier time at it than I did. And then also I kind of wrote what my thinking was behind it. I'll link it down below as far as the article that I wrote about it on Reddit. But yeah, like I said, I just wanted it to be a tool so it would be easier for the next person to be able to deploy it. So you see right here is I have placeholders where it's all of the settings that I personally used in my cluster deployment, even the operating systems, even the MAC addresses, the subnets and everything. And the cool thing is when you click in it and you fill in what you want it to be, it updates on the other parts of the site. And I'll show you guys that right now, right? So this first section right here would be the topology section. I wasn't able to get it to work the exact way that I wanted. What I really wanted was for you to be able to draw your topology and then bounce it down to a PNG, so you'll be able to store it and then put it in your own documentation and everything else. But I decided to leave it just so you would be able to visualize what is going on here. Right? Then the next thing I did, I had every other step that we needed to do laid out. And then also I had the basic config files that that you're going to be using in your cluster and everything like that. Forgive me, it might not copy and paste perfectly, but the good thing about this is, like I said before, when you update these parts of the website, it actually updates all of the other sections, including the commands that you type in the terminal, including these config files. So at least you know what it's supposed to look like, because that was one big thing that I struggled with even when I was going back and forth with the documentation. I was like, well, I understand that their name is this, but what if I want to change it to supercluster? What if I want to add dashes? What if I want to do all these? It was just way easier to have a tool like this. And I really wish I would have had this when I was there. So obviously we'll start right here, which is the setup the services machine. So in the guide that I had followed, and then also I believe in the documentation, one of the good things that they had did was they set up a services machine, and the services machine helps you so you don't separate a whole bunch of things that you don't have to, and kind of keeps it all in one place, right? So like this services machine is going to be doing things like your DNS, as well as being your load balancer. So like you could distribute traffic amongst your main control. So how we start off with this is we set it up so we can RDP into it, set up Git, we download Git so we can use it for later when we pull in the config files from the repository that I made, or you can do it from another repository, whichever one you want to do. We also start off by like updating the system, making sure that our packages are the newest that they can. That is also optional if you want to do that, right? Then here we got the create nodes and firewall virtual machine. This is basically coming at it from the perspective that you're doing this inside of a hypervisor, and with your hypervisor you're hosting all these VMs, these virtual machines or whatever, so they could be doing different tasks, and you could run all from the same server, so you can make better use of the resources that you have. So how it actually worked out was I had 3 control plane nodes, 3 worker nodes. I had a firewall virtual machine. Then I also had my services machine. First, the other step that you need to do after you get the virtual machines created, don't start them at this point, aside from the firewall and getting that all set up and everything. And also your services. Your nodes don't need to be turned on at this point yet. What you need to do is you need to go to your firewall virtual machine, and you need to actually make reservations. Your MAC addresses need to be hard coded in there for the virtual machine, so then that way it associates that with an IP address when it boots, because they need to have the right IP addresses so they're all in the same network and are able to see each other and everything like that. Trust me, I had so many issues on that. Then we configure our services machine. This is back to what I was telling you all before, where basically wanted to set up your bind and your load balancer on here, and also you can use this remote into your other node and check on them as well. This is also where you're going to be launching the actual like OpenShift installer and everything. You're going to be cloning your repository, then you're going to be installing bind. You're going to be copying the name configs. Bind, going to go back down here just to show you guys. So with bind, doing your DNS, so you're associating the IP address with actual names that humans can read. It's way easier to remember a name than a number. That's pretty much what your bind DNS is doing right there. Then next, you start the service. Create your firewall rules. You're testing your DNS. Make sure that you do this. This is something that I skipped because I didn't realize like how important DNS was to this process. You're just not gonna have a good time if you don't get this guy set up. Also, your load balancer. Make sure you guys get this knocked out. As I said before, your load balancer is gonna be in charge of distributing the traffic amongst the control planes, and then the control planes are gonna figure it out with the worker nodes as far as like how everything is gonna get sent out. Then make sure you open up the correct ports, because if you don't open up the correct ports, it's not gonna work. Like there's so many layers of things, or like if it isn't configured right, then like your whole cluster will fail, and then you'll be trying to go back and forth trying to figure out why. You do not want to have to keep on typing in the commands for those virtual machines to start them.
Man, I struggle so hard off this.
And then also you need to install the Apache web server on here, and then basically what this is doing is this is making it a website to where like you can curl and grab all of the ignition files, and the ignition files basically kick it off. The master node knows it's a master node and also has the directions to build itself. The worker node knows it's a worker node. The bootstrap knows it's a bootstrap node, and also how to kick off and do everything. Also, you can test out the web server and then make sure it's actually working. On your services node, you can type in localhost port 8080 if you did follow these directions that I did. Here is the fun part, right? So you actually have the OpenShift installer, and the OpenShift installer is basically going to be in charge of making those ignition files that I had told you guys about before. These are the files that basically make your nodes. So like your master, your bootstrap, and your worker nodes. So you're going to be playing around with the install config YAML before you make the ignition files, and also you're going to be messing around with the schedule and everything. So no pods will be scheduled on the control plane machines, and it'll be purely handled by the worker. Make sure you pay attention to steps, especially like this one, because if they aren't the right permissions and aren't in the right directory, then on your web server it isn't going to be the right path. So when you try to point your different nodes to this, it's not going to be able to find it, and then you're going to get an error that says like not available or something like that. And right here, I actually show you guys an example of like what you're typing in. So about right here's where it starts at, right? So like you have to type these lines in, and obviously the IP is going to be a little bit different. And with this, when you hit enter, it should build. It'll actually kick off the process. This is the order that you need to go in. You need to start off with your bootstrap node. You need to do your controller nodes. Then you need to do your worker nodes. And then from the services node, you can run this command and actually see the progress. After we get through with that, after the bootstrap node does everything it needs to do, you could actually go ahead and get rid of it from your HA proxy so it isn't actively being pointed to. And then also you can delete the node as well, getting those resources back. Then one of the most fun parts is actually logging into the cluster and improving the CSRs, which basically tells a cluster that, hey, this guy can be trusted. We can send traffic to him. Everything's good to go. Not going to bore you guys with those commands. Make sure that you all do this as well so you can set your persistent storage, because if not, your cluster isn't going to have long-term memory, so it's going to forget about everything, especially after boot it up again. And hopefully you don't have the same problem that I've been having lately where like your power just keeps on going out and you're really thinking everything up in the sky you have persistent storage. And then right here, I have it to where like you could test it out by actually pulling down a container and seeing where your cluster hosted. And also we have a guide right here, so you could actually make a user account, because by default you're gonna have like a cube admin temporary user. Funny story, I've actually seen it in production where this is the only user that was set up. Yeah, with that being said, got all of that sorted out the way, and I was able to give you guys a brief summary. With that being said, once again, I hope you guys really are able to take advantage of this website. I hope you guys are able to have way easier time deploying the cluster than I did. I had such a struggle with it. And yeah, I will see you guys in the next video.